I didn't know any of this about this guy, but holy, this guy is dubious. I'm your host Yusuf, and these are the top 10 chilling things you didn't know about Ed Kemper. Make sure to subscribe and ring that bell to get notified whenever we upload a new video. Anyways, let's Kemper real. Get it? Number 10. He was always fascinated by terminating things. Edmund Emil Kemper III, born on December 18, 1948, had a contentious relationship with his beverage-addicted mother, Clarnell Strandberg, who moved him and his two sisters from Burbank, California to Montana after she divorced his father in 1957. He showed signs of severe mental disturbance from an early age, when he would cut off the heads of his sisters' dolls and even coerced his sisters into playing a game called Gas Chamber, in which he had them blindfold him and lead him to a chair where he pretended to writhe in agony until he passed away. At 10, he buried one of the family cats alive, and at 13, he ended another with a knife. Abuse of animals is a really early sign of psychopathy, so if you know any scumbag that does those things to animals, then keep a distance and maybe tell someone you trust.
It started with surrogates at a non-human level. Physical objects, my possessions, other people's, destruction of things that are cared about. And then destruction of things that are living on a lower level, small animals, insects, animals, and then finally people.
Number 9, he ended his own grandparents. After sending him to live with his father, briefly in the hopes this would cure his behavior,
I wanted to be with my father, and I wanted to get away from my mother because I was dreaming, thinking, fantasizing all day long. I couldn't get it out of my head.
His mother tried passing him on to live with his paternal grandparents in North Fork, California, hoping they could be of more help to him. Unfortunately, she couldn't have been more wrong. After a fight with his grandmother in 1964, then 15-year-old Kemper shot and ended her in the kitchen, and when his grandfather returned to the house, he shot and ended him too. He later explained to authorities that he removed his grandmother to see what it felt like, and that he terminated his grandfather so he wouldn't have to grieve the loss of his wife.
And then a month later, I'm up living with my grandparents in the mountains, and 10 months later, I murdered them.
Sounds like he thinks it was a service to his grandfather to remove him from the world. Kemper's crimes were deemed incomprehensible for a 15-year-old to commit, and court psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. He was sent to Atascadero State Hospital, a maximum security facility in San Luis Obispo County that houses mentally ill convicts.
And I sensed everybody in the world just stopping what they were doing, turning around, saw what I did, and are coming to get me.
Number 8, he tricked several medical professionals. Following the slaughter of his grandparents, a variety of tests led to his being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and sent to Atascadero State Mental Hospital, a maximum security facility for mentally ill convicts. When he was released at the age of 21, the professionals at the hospital declared him to be a perfect example of the benefits of rehabilitating youthful offenders. This statement, written by his probation officer upon completion of the program, makes this painfully clear. If I were to see this patient without having any history available or getting any history from him, I would think that we're dealing with a very well-adjusted young man who had initiative, intelligence, and who was free of any psychiatric illness. It is my opinion that he has made a very excellent response to the years of treatment and rehabilitation, and I would see no psychiatric reason to consider him to be any danger to himself or to another member of society. And since it may allow him more freedom as an adult to develop his potential, I would consider it reasonable to have a permanent expunction of his juvenile records. Number 7, he was a state trooper. In 1969, at the age of 21, Kemper was released from Atascadero State Mental Hospital, where he had been committed following the slaughter of his grandparents. He attended community college in the hopes of bettering himself, all the while still living with his mother. He desperately wanted to be a state trooper, however, he was not accepted to train. Oddly enough, this wasn't because he had been hospitalized following the execution of his grandparents, but because at 6'9" and 300 pounds, he was just too big and too tall. In fact, following his release and after some urging from his mother, Kemper's juvenile record was erased, leaving the troopers with no idea of his previous crimes. Kemper was released on parole on his 21st birthday. Then he went on an 11-month removal spree targeting women. Between May 1972 and April 1973, Kemper butchered 5 college students, a high school student, his mother, and her best friend. He severed the heads of all of his victims except that of his mother's best friend, whom he strangled April 20th, 1973, to support a made-up story that she and his mother had gone away on vacation together. Kemper, who became known as the Co-Ed Butcher, was arrested 4 days later after he drove to Pueblo, Colorado and called the police from a phone booth to confess. Number 6, he tricked people by being in a rush.
Elaborate precautions. He drove around universities and picked up hitchhiking co-eds while wearing these glasses.
Yeah. These are the ones. Now, would you get in the car with this man? Huh?
With no work prospects on the horizon, he became bored with his existence once again, and as we know from his previous crimes, a bored psychopath is a dangerous thing. Instead, he turned his attention to the high number of female hitchhikers in the area. In 1972, Kemper slaughtered 18-year-old Mary Ann Pesci, 18-year-old Anita Luchessa, and Aiko Koo. In 1973, he slaughtered 19-year-old Cindy Shaw, 23-year-old Rosalind Thorpe, and 21-year-old Alice Liu. He had convinced the young co-eds, who were all in the prime of their lives, that he was not a threat to them, by using a cunning trick to get them into his car. Kemper said, "Some girls weren't really convinced, so I looked at my watch and I sighed, like, come on, I don't have time." And that convinced them. They had the impression I was in a hurry and didn't have time to hurt them. Number 5. He wasn't the only active butcher in the area. Edmund Kemper was not the only active serial butcher in the Santa Cruz area in the early 1970s. 2 other men, Herbert Mullen and John Linley Frazier, were also active in the area. The police even suspected Mullen of having ended 2 of Kemper's victims, while Kemper was initially a suspect in one of Mullen's executions. The police definitely had several investigative issues related to the 3 executioners at the time. Mullen and Kemper both ended people in very gruesome ways, and Mullen was eventually convicted on 10 counts of slaughter, in which he was sentenced to life in prison. The 2 serial butchers also had some interaction while in custody. While in neighboring jail cells, Kemper performed what he called behavior modification treatment on Mullen by giving him peanuts whenever Mullen was good. He sometimes bothered other prisoners by singing, so Kemper splashed water on him. Mullen is still incarcerated and not eligible for parole until 2021. John Linley Frazier was a mass terminator who shot and ended a doctor, his wife, 2 sons, and the doctor's secretary, which led to his conviction and execution sentence in 1971. After California abolished the execution penalty in 1972, his sentence was commuted to life in prison. His odd religious behavior was revealed in the note he left behind at the slaughters, part of which said, "From this day forward, anyone and or everyone or company of persons who misuses the natural environment or destroys same will suffer the penalty of demise by the people of the free universe. I and my comrades from this day forth will fight until demise or freedom against anyone who does not support natural life on this planet. Materialism must go, or mankind will stop." He was found passed away hanging in his cell in 2009 at the age of 63. Number 4, he ended his mother in the most gruesome way.
He was released to the one person that authorities at the state mental hospital recommended he never see again.
The rage and disdain Kemper felt for his mother finally reached a boiling point in April 1973. On Good Friday, his mother returned home after a night of drinking and began arguing with her son. Kemper then entered her bedroom and bludgeoned her with a hammer before cutting her throat with a knife. He then decapitated the body and later revealed he pinned the head against the wall and screamed at it for an hour whilst throwing darts. He also confessed to ripping out her voice box, which he deemed appropriate as she yelled and screamed at him so much over the years. After hiding the body parts around the house, his mother's close friend came over to the house too, and he strangled her. Later, he said, "I certainly wanted for my mother a nice, quiet, easy passing like everyone else wants." Kemper targeted women as they reminded him of his mother and his overall hatred for women. He stabbed or strangled his victims and would later decapitate or dismember the corpses. Several discarded body parts were found washed up on the shore, and he buried a head in his mother's backyard. The other heads he kept as sickening serial butcher trophies.
Ed Kemper has been serving a life sentence in this California prison since 1973.
Number 3, he confessed to the police.
During that time, I become engaged to someone who's young and is beautiful and very much the same advantages and very much the same upbringing and Disneyland values. And she's very much the reason I surrendered.
On Easter Sunday 1973, Kemper fled his mother's home following her slaughter and made his way to Colorado. He realized it would not be long before the crime was linked to him, so he rang the police back in Santa Cruz to make a full confession. Initially, the police did not believe his confession or were convinced they had finally caught the feared co-ed butcher. Kemper was close friends with the local police, often drinking with them in bars and restaurants. They referred to him as Big Ed and had revealed to him over the time a lot about the slaughters, which allowed him to anticipate their next move in the investigation. They believed this was all one big prank from a friend that had become known as a friendly giant. Kemper waited for an officer to arrive and arrest him. He was considered legally sane, and when asked what he believed was an appropriate punishment for his crime, he replied execution by torture. Number 2, he scared an FBI agent. Stanford psychiatrist Donald Lunde interviewed Kemper from 1972 to 1973. The guards would lock them both in a small room, and a panic button under the table would alert them when they finished. Lunde said, "I laughed at the notion that he might attack me. He had no reason to do so, and besides, the panic button would bring a squad of deputies instantly." Kemper then reminded Lunde, "Has it ever dawned on you that I'm a foot taller and weigh damn near twice as you?" When Lunde hit that panic button, it took 7 minutes for the guards to respond. Former FBI agent Robert K. Ressler had a similar interaction with Kemper. Bundled in the same interview room, Ressler hit the panic button and the guards didn't respond. Noticing his panic, Kemper chillingly told him, "If I went ape in here, you'd be in a lot of trouble, wouldn't you? I could screw your head off and place it on the table to greet the guard." The guards entered the room 30 minutes later. That's scary. Number 1, he's still alive today. On November 8, 1973, Kemper was found guilty of first-degree execution. He was sentenced to life behind bars and is currently imprisoned at the California Medical Facility. Since 1977, he has spent his time recording audiobooks and loaned his voice to Flowers in the Attic, The Glass Key, and The Rosary Slaughters, to name a few. He spent more than 5,000 hours in the recording booth at the prison and has received 2 awards for his efforts. However, the serial butcher has no desire to leave prison, as he's quite content living out the rest of his life behind bars. Since 1985, he has waived his right to parole hearings. In 2017, this is his belief. No one's ever going to let him out, and he's just happy. He's just as happy going about his life in prison. In his 70s, he will spend the rest of his days in prison and, at the time of writing, in relatively good health. Kemper has outlived his victims by decades. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and comment if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time on Crime Time.